What's going on, guys? This is Empty Box, and I want to talk about that hot button topic that is soccer and Americans in Formula One. First of all, let's start with an undeniable truth here. Carl Edwards is a better driver than Michael Schumacher. The proof is in the pudding. The video evidence is here on YouTube. Therefore, Carl Edwards is the greatest Formula One driver of all time because he is better than the statistical greatest Formula One driver of all time. Oh, and to pour more fuel on the fire, Kimi couldn't cut it as a third-tier NASCAR driver because Finnish people can't even make simple left-hand turns. Simple as that. Of course, anyone with a clue and anyone fluent in the language of sarcasm should be able to easily understand how asinine both of those comments are. Things don't work that way. But there's a reason why I mention both of them because it's relevant to this topic, and we do come back to it a little bit later on. So let's begin. So let's start with some statistics from that lovely, always correct, never wrong website known as Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, there have been only 19 Americans to start more than 10 Formula One races. We'll use 10 races as our baseline here in this discussion as, well, for one, the Indy 500 used to count as a Formula One race, and therefore it really skews everything because there's a lot of Americans who started in Formula One because of the Indy 500 and how that all works out. And I feel like if you're only doing just a couple of races anyways, you're relatively inconsequential. You're someone who, made it there for one reason or another, especially back in the day where the idea of a third car was common. Not really serious players. At least if you're doing 10 races or more, you're probably there for a season or a bulk of a season. And so that's why we're talking this way. But only 19 Americans in the history of Formula One have made more than 10 starts. So have there been a lot of Americans in Formula One? No, of course not. But let's shift gears here and get a little bit of a point of comparison. According to that same infallible source, there have been 4 Canadians to start more than 10 Grand Prix, and Mexico holds it down with 4 drivers to have started 10 or more races as well. As for the rest of North America, I could be wrong here as I didn't even really bother to look it up, but it's got to be near enough to zero to consider it a statistical anomaly, if anything. Of course, we must bring up population naturally, as it does play somewhat of a factor. Currently today, roughly 325 million people live in the United States, roughly 36 million in Canada, and 127 million in Mexico. The United States has double and a bit population-wise over Mexico and Canada combined, and if you were to do the math, we're looking at 8 drivers to start 10 or more races from Canada and Mexico total, compared to 19 for the United States itself. Double and a bit. So if it's a problem for the United States, it's also a problem for Canada and Mexico. The only difference is, obviously, there is a Canadian and a Mexican racing in Formula One currently, which is actually quite exceptionally rare in the grand scheme of things. My point is this. While yes, I know comparing populations and representation in this simple fashion is arguably somewhat close to just looking at numbers in a vacuum and doesn't take into account the things like the opportunities available to the citizens or the level of interest nationally in motorsports and things like that. But I believe, given we're talking about nearly 60 years of motorsport history here, there's enough to establish a baseline and see the trends throughout the years. Now stick with me here as we move outside the confines of North America. For a wider reference at other countries that are far flung from Europe, there have been 10 Australians who have started 10 races from a current population of roughly 24 million. 10 Japanese drivers have started 10 races from about 127 million population. 25 Brazilians have started 10 or more races from 207 million population. But oh, you actually thought that was good. You're wrong. Let's compare that to Britain. At least by a rough count, which may not be 100% accurate admittedly because I ain't got enough fingers and toes to count that high, 65 Brits have started 10 or more races from 65 million-ish population. Now, I'm too lazy to do the same for France, Germany, and Italy in particular, but it's going to look exactly the same. There you go. It's not an America problem. It's not a question of why can't America make a Formula One driver. It's simply the nature of the beast for non-European drivers. It's no different than the uphill battle a European driver would face busting into the world of NASCAR, for instance. That's just how it is, and that is how it always will be. So while yes, we do look at things and be like, hey, there hasn't been an American Formula One world champion in like 40 years. We also forget that, hey, there hasn't been an Australian Formula One champion for almost 40 years. And that's not intended as an insult to Australia, but if you look at the stats and look at things and, kind of adjust and consider the national level of interest in Formula One, are we not getting where we should be as Americans in Formula One with what it is compared to what other countries are producing? It's only when we look at it as we must beat Europe at being European that we fall short. But I want to kind of dig a little bit deeper and talk about the lack of Americans in Formula One, and why it won't change and why you shouldn't particularly care and no one should particularly care. And I'm not just talking about what I've already talked about, which I feel has basically, that's that. It's just the way it is. Now I got to be careful here because I could go off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think we all know why there is so much discussion as to why there are no American Formula One drivers currently and why it has been such a drought. While we don't discuss why there have been so few Canadian drivers, Mexican drivers, Australian or Japanese drivers, which are actually just as common in the grand scheme of things apparently, there is one reason. Say it with me now. 'Cause America! It's easy to say, well, we're America, we kick ass in the Olympics, we got the Benjamins, we got the 325 million red-blooded Americans and the power of the bald eagle, and a lot of other stuff. We simply expect Americans because America. There is, after all, no reason we can't. There is no reason we shouldn't, for we exist to piss off the rest of the world, and we are proud of it. Of course, we're being silly here, we're trying to have some fun, but it's not that far-fetched. Now, I know there's one thing here, and this is going to be really handy. I know a lot of people outside the United States are thinking one thing. Yeah, well, you only win in the things the rest of the world don't care about. Call us when you come play our version of football well. Follow me here. The soccer problem. Sorry, rest of the world. I refuse to call it football until we actually play it well, and then maybe I'll consider it. The soccer problem in America is pretty well documented. We should be rocking it out in the World Cup, going deep into the tournament every 4 years. That should be the expectation, not the exception. There is, after all, no reason we shouldn't. No reason we can't. Instead, we come up with lame excuses such as the best talent in America doesn't play soccer, so on and so forth. But yet, our women's soccer team is absolutely freaking badass as can be. We have so many American football players that we could crush pretty much any team that the rest of the world could assemble, and that's just using some random high school team from Texas. The Japanese and Korean baseball gods graduate to the American Major League Baseball, not the other way around. You can make a solid argument that our college basketball teams could give many European pro teams a run for their money, if not beating them outright. In the Olympics, we're always towards the top in the medal count, always right up there and winning a bunch of stuff. Yet is anyone going to tell me that curling is really that big in America in a serious, non-ironic fashion? And I know for people outside of the United States, this may sound like overly patriotic chest beating here, but it's not. The answer as to why the United States has been able to do these things is simple. America, the land of opportunity and all that shiz. That's why it exists. That's why it's possible. And that's why the excuse of, well, the best talent doesn't play this is absolute lame garbage. And that is often what we see whenever the topic of Americans in Formula One, what people seem to think for some stupid, misguided reason. Because NASCAR exists, somehow the best American drivers end up driving stock cars rather than Formula One race cars. Because one thing exists, we can't have another thing. When clearly that is not anywhere near how it works. In my eyes, that is absolutely believing that in an alternative United States where oval racing doesn't exist, Carl Edwards goes to Formula One and is the absolute man. If oval racing doesn't exist after all, surely he would have been a great, fantastic, young kart racer and win all the races and eventually be the greatest Formula One driver of all time after all. But again, at the end of the day, it's not about that. It's about the talent, the skill, the intangibles, the effort, the work and desire, the opportunities, the ability to advance, the challenging competition to make oneself better, the great coaches, teachers, and leaders to improve the talent, to provide the work, meeting together to create greatness in anything. There is no limit on greatness in any sport or work field in any country. Keeping the soccer reference up here, it's like saying Portugal can't have another really great, super duper, mega, really amazing player because Ronaldo has used up all of the country's great player points like it's a game of freaking civilization. The existence of Thomas Edison did not mean that Tesla never existed. Kyle Larson does not mean that there can be no American Formula One driver. The NASCAR talent sponge does not exist, never existed, and is just a lame, candy-ass excuse. Oh boy, it's going to be fun to read the comments after that one. There is nothing keeping an American driver from being able to race in Formula One, providing that the talent is there. Just the same that there is nothing keeping a Finnish driver out of NASCAR, providing the talent is there. But what it really gets back to is talent meeting effort and opportunities. And in particular, I've already done a video on the topic of America's strange love of oval racing compared to everywhere else in the world and why that is. You can find that link down in the description below, but long story short, it's largely something that is a necessary evil in America for racing to even work just on a simple geographical basis. Oftentimes, again, that NASCAR talent sponge idea, if it weren't for those hundreds, maybe even 1,000 plus small little oval tracks dotted around the country, it's quite likely that the talent that we look at and say, man, in an alternate world, that guy should have ended up, wheeling open wheel cars in Europe, and being one of the best in the world, maybe if he cuts it. Well, that talent likely never would have gotten the same opportunity. And that is why Europeans have a better chance in Formula One. They are simply at a natural advantage on the opportunities front in relation to what they have available. They aren't stuck half a globe away. They are right there where everyone is looking. Racing and systems designed to specifically cultivate the talent for a specific series. While of course anyone with the talent and effort from any other nationality, any other region of the world has a chance of getting the opportunities, clearly it's an advantage to have the opportunities right on your doorstep. After all, unlike soccer, the rules and regulations of racing change from series to series. Think of it this way. Here in America, we play our football with that thing that you Europeans out there call a hand egg from time to time. Europe plays their football with a sphere. Well, a ball, but it's a sphere. You get the point. Now imagine trying to play the other football with the wrong ball. It just doesn't work out at all. Well, yes, a few Americans do end up going over to Europe and trying to chase down the Formula One dream, just the same as some Americans do play soccer, believe it or not. I know it's strange to me too. It's a numbers game. It's an effort game. Just because someone goes over there doesn't mean that they were ever going to make it, because maybe they didn't have the talent even though they had the opportunities and the effort. In other words, if I could speak to my fellow American Formula One fans out there, it's easy to look at Santino Ferrucci's meltdown, Alexander Rossi getting there but not really having a legitimate chance, and I think most people would say it's fair to say that. Scott Speed and how that all went down and the stories around that, and on and on and on and on. You can find a bunch of different excuses, and maybe if this event changed, it all could have been different. But at the end of the day, we cannot forget that that is the same case for countless other drivers. The only thing unique in those cases is their nationality. Going back to the whole talent, effort, and opportunities bit, and we're not making Formula One drivers, not trying to make Formula One drivers, I have very little doubt that we could make Formula One drivers. There's no reason, again, there's no reason why we couldn't if that was the goal. However, that should not be the goal. America has its own racing history, its own racing heritage. American racing should be about Indy cars and stock cars duking it out rather than making Formula One drivers. In the end, producing more American Formula One drivers would require a shift in goals and therefore a shift in what we are producing. Going from being its own unique product that is distinctly, well, that's what they race in America because they're weird like that, to simply being a cog in the machine riding Formula One's coattails. Now, as a big IndyCar fan, as well as one of those weirdo American Formula One fans, I would lose interest in an instant if IndyCar tried to simply be Formula 2 Americas or some crap like that. And I know I'm absolutely not alone on that. That's just simply not American. That's not the way we've done things. It's not what we should be doing. It's bad enough that we've pissed away so much of our racing heritage through self-inflicted lunacy or simply the changing of times that have rendered dirt midget drivers no longer nearly as godlike as they were once perceived. But why should we stop blazing our own trail just to make more Formula One drivers? Yeah, we could easily ditch oval racing. We almost already have. We could focus solely on road courses and ditch the idea of a street circuit as we have it here in North America. We could lighten up the cars, ditch ground effects, put the power steering back on. We could just buy a different Dallara instead of the IndyCar. We could just literally switch to GP2s and Dallara's still making a killing. It would be easy. It would be trivial almost. It would certainly make our talent more ready and relevant to European teams in Formula One. It would be Formula 2 Americas. But who cares? Why should we do that? Simply so we have a better chance of seeing a different flag beside a driver's name in a Formula One race? Maybe, just maybe, we get to hear a different anthem on the podium for once? Pretend we care when we really don't care just because of a flag? Again, I don't doubt it would be successful. Almost anything would be anything resembling progress would be success in that sense. It can't get much worse realistically. But who would want Formula 2 Americas? Personally, I want 900 plus horsepower again. I want to see drivers working away with even less downforce in truly badass race cars. I want to see all the types of circuits in one series, making for a uniquely challenging series unlike any other. I don't want to watch parking lot road course races, or parking lot street circuits for that matter. And that goes for just about everyone. Everyone will tell you that same thing. After all, there's very much a reason why kart was so massive in the 90s. And not just only here in America. Because it was a unique, awesome, fantastic product. And it was different. But it didn't need to be Formula One, even if people thought it was competing with Formula One. Probably Formula One thought it was competing with Formula One, even though it was distinctly different and was its own unique standalone item. It was a much greater contribution to the world of racing than simply having an American driver on the grid in Formula One. And frankly, it was much more exciting than just cheering for a guy because of a flag next to his name. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we will return. And maybe to Formula One as well. Who knows? Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Bye.